Sarabi's love for Mufasa was only briefly shown in Disney's The Lion King. Yet, despite only having a few on-screen interactions, it was clear that the two had very deep feelings for each other, and it seemed like nobody could come between that. But if they were real lions, that would not have been the case at all. In fact, if all the characters in The Lion King acted more like animals that they were based on, there's a good chance that Sarabi and all of the other lionesses would be head over paw for Scar rather than Mufasa. That has led some fans to speculate that the two should have been together all along. First and foremost, in the animal kingdom, Mufasa would not have been all that and a bag of chips because lions tend to like the dark and mysterious type like his brother Scar. This isn't anyone's opinion either, it's actually a known fact that male lions that have darker colored manes tend to be the more dominant lions in a pride as well as the more sought after for breeding. This means that if it came down to a choice for Sarabi or any of the other female lions in the pride, they would pick Scar over his brother. According to multiple studies, a lion such as Scar who has a darker mane was found to have higher levels of testosterone in the wild and tended to be better fed, which signifies their dominance in the pride. That same study showed that female lions tended to choose the male with the darker mane when given the choice of who to breed with. Oddly enough, the results had absolutely nothing to do with the length or how full the mane was, but instead it seemed the only factor that made a difference was how dark in color the lion's mane was. So while Disney made it seem like Mufasa was the true king of Pride Rock, if Scar wasn't hiding in the shadows, he would have been the cool cat on the block. Now, interestingly enough, there are a few theories out there that suggest that Scar was in a relationship with Sarabi, but that wasn't until after Mufasa passed away. And though that might seem unlikely, considering how devoted Sarabi seemed to her late husband, it's actually something that's really possible considering how lions function in the wild. On top of that, there's even a chance that Sarabi had a child with Scar, and Disney simply chose to omit that from their movie to keep it kid-friendly and maintain their chosen storyline. Whether you believe that they were supposed to be together or not, there's almost no denying that Sarabi and Scar most likely had a child together that fans didn't know about. That might be a little mind-blowing, but it lines up perfectly with the sequel to The Lion King, Simba's Pride. Plus, it also makes sense for them to have had at least one cub together simply based on how lions act in the wild when it comes to their pride hierarchy. As you know, following Mufasa's death and Simba's disappearance, Scar took over control of the Pride lands and asserted himself as the new king. And if the big cats in The Lion King were playing by the rules of the animal kingdom, that would spell disaster for the cubs as well as all the lionesses in the pride. Not only that, but it would also suggest that Scar and Sarabi had a child together that nobody really knew about. You see, according to reports, when a male lion or a coalition of males takes over a pride as their dominant leader, they will almost always kill all of the young cubs in the pride. They do this so that none of those cubs would be related to the new leader, and therefore the lions don't feel compelled to expend energy to make sure they survive. And sadly, whether the Lion King showed it or not, that's exactly what Scar would have done after his successful takeover of Pride Rock. Every single cub that wasn't his own would have been killed and most likely fed to his hyena companions. Now this could mean multiple things for Simba's love interest Nala, who clearly was one of the survivors of the culling of the cubs. It could mean that Nala was either related to Scar in some way, or the more likely reason being that Scar planned on mating with her just like he did all the other lionesses, which is yet another thing that Disney wisely omitted. And if this real-world behavior bled into the world of Disney, then Simba's mother wouldn't have had much of a choice and would have ended up with Scar following Mufasa's death. So when Scar ended up taking over the pride in the movie, he would have tried to assert himself in the gene pool by having as many cubs as he could with all of the lionesses of Pride Rock. And that would of course include Sarabi, who fans know was perfectly able to have cubs considering the fact that she and Mufasa had a child together. This means that while Simba was away, he became a half-brother as Scar and his mother most likely had one or multiple cubs together. Sadly, those cubs would never be seen after Simba returned to the Pride Lands and put an end to Scar's tyranny, because you have to remember that even though he was the good guy, Simba was still a male lion after all. This means that he would have done a culling of the cubs just as Scar did when he took over, and there would have been a few at least. Think about it. Disney never disclosed exactly how long Simba was away from Pride Rock, but most people believe that it was somewhere between 3 to 5 years considering how much he grew. And according to zoologists, in the wild, a lion will breed once every 2 years or so, which means the Scar would have been able to go through at least one breeding cycle with every female lion in the pride. That includes Sarabi and even Nala, who also likely had one of Scar's cubs, which would make an awkward return home for Simba, to say the least. That being said, Simba brutally taking out a bunch of young lions seems really out of character for the grub eater, so there's actually a good chance that some of Scar and Sarabi's cubs survived, and may have even appeared in The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. You see, in Simba's Pride, Pride, Disney actually revealed that Scar had at least 2 children, though it's unclear who their mother is. For a while, many fans speculated that Zira was their mother, considering she raised Scar's children, Vitani and Nuka, but there's always the possibility that she just decided to raise them out of her devotion to her dearly departed Scar and wasn't related to them at all. Instead, some fans believe that Vitani, Scar's daughter, was actually one of the cubs that he had with Nala when he was the leader of Pride Rock, and Vitani's older brother Nuka was Sarabi's son. That might be a little hard to believe, but there was a brief interaction between Nala and the young lioness that made fans speculate that there was more to their relationship than Disney revealed. When Nala and Vitani confronted one another, the younger lion asked Nala a simple question: "Where's your pretty daughter?" However, there seemed to be a strange, disdain-filled emphasis on the word pretty. Some fans on Reddit have speculated that the distinctive emphasis implied a bitter hatred toward Nala and her child, almost as if she knew them personally. Well, perhaps she did. Some theorize that while Scar was the king of Pride Rock, he had a child with Nala shortly before Nala found Simba and encouraged him to come back to the Pride. But as mentioned before, because Vitani wasn't related to Simba at all, she was exiled with the rest of Scar's family. And if that's true, then when she was referring to Nala and Simba's daughter as pretty, she was saying it in a way that meant she was asking, "How's your daughter that was apparently good enough for you to keep?" Now, admittedly, that bit of the theory is sort of a reach, but it's definitely easy to see where it's coming from. It wouldn't be too surprising if Disney ever decided to reveal a deeper relationship between the 2 lionesses. Of course, that would also shadow in comparison to Disney admitting that Sarabi and Scar should have been together at some point during the movie's timeline. Now, an interesting way that they could do this would be for them to reveal that Kovu, the young lion who seemed to look the most like Scar and Simba, was actually Sarabi's child. While that would put quite a damper in Kiara's love life, it would certainly explain why Kovu had the same color palette as Scar, but seemed to have a build that was closer to Simba in size and stature. Plus, it would also work with the breeding cycle of wild lions. Since Sarabi had just given birth to Simba, she wouldn't have been able to breed with Scar right away. However, shortly before Simba returned to the Pride Lands, there's a chance that she and Scar would have done what wild animals do and end up having a cub or 2 together. Now, this is something that Disney would most likely never confirm, deny, or even touch on, because that would make the entire plotline for Lion King 2 really strange and not appropriate for young children. But it always felt weird that Kovu looked the way he did when Scar's other 2 children that were shown both seemed to be thin and emaciated like he was. Meanwhile, Kovu had a full, fluffy mane like Simba did, which suggests that he had stronger genes than his 2 siblings. This would be entirely possible if he was related to Sarabi, who was a strong and fearless lioness. Now, even though that connection might seem like a stretch that Disney will never talk about, the idea that Scar and Sarabi would have been together in the wild is something that seems hard to refute when you put it all together. What do you think, though? Is it likely that Scar and Sarabi ended up in some sort of relationship after he took over Pride Rock? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.